Are we on yet, John?
Not officially, yes. Steve hasn't
Yeah.
turned on.
Just a quick question, that last thing. Did you actually see the attachment?
Ed, stop.
We're actually live streaming on YouTube at the moment.
Yes.
Okay, good.
They kicked me out. It's showing me the meeting will begin soon. Huh? Sorry, what? It's not letting me get in. I'm sorry, be with you in just one moment. You're going to need to turn yours off. You're going to need to turn yours, not your meeting off. You're going to turn your speaker off, or you're going to hear feedback all night. No, you're just turning off. Oh, maybe. I'm having a challenge with the screen that pulls up the agenda. It's not allowing me to enter into the Zoom meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. And then I will try to get that. I would make note for everyone that we will be recording the meeting this evening. And so it is showing that. Yeah, okay. One other moment, folks. Sorry about that. Nope. All right, so I think we have it up now. Not sure everybody can see it as well, but because I can't share the screen, but it's right there in the little. So real quickly, for the public who is on, we are recording this meeting. I would make note that we are not tracking anything in chat other than whether somebody is asking to make a public comment. We're not tracking public comments in track or in chat So please do not use chat to make public comment. If I can go through, we will be continuing to do this meeting as the virtual meeting as we have at the past several, and we will do that. And during the meeting, we will hear public comment one of 4 ways. You'll be able to make public comment as an attendee by raising your hand, and you can do that. And when it comes to the time of public comment, we will recognize the raised hand and we will allow you to make public comment. The second way that you can do that is if you are unable to raise your hand for any reason, you're calling in on phone, or you're, for whatever reason, it's not working, you could let us know through chat that you wish to speak, and we would open that up for you and we would make it so that you could speak. If you're on by phone, and I'm looking here, I don't know if I don't have anybody that's on by phone at this point, but if you are on by phone, you can send an email to publiccomment@newtowntownship.org. Again, that's public comment, all one word, @Newtown Township, also one word, .org. And you can send that if you send your name and your phone number, or your name and the fact that you wish to make a public comment to us at that, we would recognize you from the call or from the log on list, from the attendee list. If you wish to make public comment but don't wish to actually say anything, you can also send your public comment to publiccomment@newtowntownship.org. Again, that's public comment, all spelled out, @newtowntownship.org. You must include your name and address. If you do not include your name and address, we will not be able to recognize it for purposes of public comment. And the other way, and we've already checked it, is that we always accept public comment in the Dropbox. As of about 10 minutes ago, there was no public comment in the Dropbox. So I believe those are the instructions for this evening, Mr. Chairman, so I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Neese. At this time, I'd just like to announce that the board was in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss 4 separate legal matters. With that being said, I'd ask I'll call the meeting to order. Ask Mr. Neese to please call the roll.
Okay. Mr. Nawn,
Present.
Mr. Partridge,
Here.
Ms. Roberts Lightcap,
Here.
Mr. Russo,
Here.
Mr. Altieri,
Here.
your solicitor, engineer, and manager are here.
Thank you, Mr. Neese. I'd now like to, at this moment, take a moment of silence. Let's keep in our thoughts and our prayers all those healthcare workers who are on the front lines of battling this pandemic. Truly, they are the real superheroes, and I just want to make sure that we recognize them properly. So please take a few moments. Let's think of those folks. Okay, we have before us this evening's agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda or consideration of any additions to the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I have a addition to the agenda. I would like to add under new business 15.5, that the Board of Supervisors advertise the open position on the Environmental Advisory Council. According to the report that was provided to us by the EAC dated February 23rd, 2020, they state in there that there is a vacancy that they are authorized to have up to 7 members. There are 6 on there right now. And so I'd like to add that in there.
Okay, so your motion is to accept the agenda with the addition of item 15.5.
That is correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
This was seconded by Supervisor Roberts Lightcap. Any further questions or discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on our agenda, we have just a reminder that, oh no, I'm sorry, we do have a period now. Any public comment for agenda items? This is for agenda items only. If you have a public comment, please raise your hand and Mr. Neese will figure out how to acknowledge you.
So I just checked, this is Rich Lafayette for the record. I just checked the mailbox, the email box, and we do not have any there, but we do have 2 people raising their hands. And the first up, we are going to start with Miss Wilson. Miss Wilson, in 1 moment, you will have the ability to talk.
This is Patty Wilson, 4111 Battles Lane, in reference to item 1110. I listened at last meeting about the request by Lissitor
Oh, did I
to,
just lose this?
Oh,
Did somebody turn her off?
Go ahead, Patty.
I listened last month to the discussion about Lissitor. I'm asking that the request by Lissitor to make a change to their approved plan as a result of allowing homes to deteriorate would be denied. Aside from offering their own opinion as to the homes, properties that were to remain, it was not the Historical Society who determined and approved the land development plan. It's the Board of Supervisors' responsibility and should represent the entirety of the residents, not a particular group or neighborhood. Allowing a developer once again, without permission, to change an approved plan will not result in a benefit to the residents of the township. In the recent past, you've had to deal with the Muirwood berm, and prior to that, you allowed the Springhouse developer to abandon a required walking trail, even though it was part of an approved plan. These developers, and now Toll, seem to think that it is better to do whatever they want and then ask for forgiveness. I'm going to urge you again to require Toll to build according to the approved plan. Thank you.
thank you, Mrs. Wilson. And just as a point of clarification, the board will be meeting, the board members and staff will be meeting with first the Listener Homeowner Association and then Toll Brothers to work this issue out, and we will report back in what our findings are.
So I'm sorry to do this, but as soon as Patty started talking, I lost internet. So can I just get a quick synopsis of what it was that I just missed?
Mrs. Wilson was asking questions about or urging us to make Toll Brothers come in to the board to amend their plan because they failed to maintain their buildings.
Okay. Thank you very much. So she's in favor of keeping the building. Is that what the,
I
Yes,
don't think that's an issue. Would have to assume so, but at least have them come in to amend their plan. And I commented back to her that the board, as we had discussed, would be meeting with various, both the Listener Town Owners Association and then Toll Brothers themselves to work out this issue amongst other issues.
thank you very much.
The next person we have up is Cindy Mahalo. Cindy, you will have the ability to talk.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I don't know if this is the appropriate time to make a comment, but I would like to make comments or questions on presentation 10.1, the MS4 presentation.
Okay.
Okay, well, some of my questions might be addressed by her presentation, but I have the,
Yeah, Cindy, what I would probably recommend, because usually what this section is just if you have like general public comment. What I think would probably be more beneficial is if Eileen does her presentation, you still have the opportunity to ask questions after she's done doing that before we vote on that, I would think. Or no, Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to facilitate what would be easiest for her.
It might be easier if Mrs. Mahalo continues right now. Let's let her get her questions out and then we can tell her the presentation. Eileen can tell her presentation answered them, and then we can still, if everything's not answered, we can still ask her if there's any question.
okay, great, thank you. I am looking at a memo from Eileen to Steve Neese on April 9th, and she mentioned that homeowner complaints registered over the past year, mostly due to significant storm events, have been the subject of several recent proposals submitted to the board for their consideration for further investigation and options for correction. My comment or request on this is that the EAC would be kept informed of what actions are being taken, because she's noted in her document, and it's kind of an established role, that EACs assist with the minimum control measure for MS4 permits of the first control measure of public education and second one of public involvement. And we can best perform that role if we understand some of the actions that are being taken in the township, and we can help inform the public as to the benefit of those. So that was a request. My second,
Absolutely. I mean, it would be our intention that the EAC would be kept abreast of what we're doing with the stormwater management program and proposals.
great, thank you. Then I have a question about the tree planting, and that is that it says that the assumption of the tree planting is that it will be accompanied by the replacement of impervious cover, that will be, it assumes the removal of impervious surface. And I'm just wondering, where are they thinking that these trees will be planted that impervious surface would be removed? Generally, in the past, the township's been planting trees in parks and in vegetated areas.
I think that's a question that's, now that we have that out, I think that's a question that's best left to let Eileen explain when we get to her presentation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Is that it?
I'll save the rest for later.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
We do have one more public comment, and it's Rachel's, I'm sorry, Santorio? Steve, if you could unmute her. I do not have the ability to at the moment.
Do you hear me?
Yes, we do, Rachel.
Okay. I live on Hickory Lane in Newtown Square. I was always it was understood to me that the work shouldn't start until 7 o'clock on Westchester Pike. Maybe the labor doesn't begin, but the beeping sound starts before 6:30. Very annoying, especially when you're in your 80s, not well, and all you're hearing is beep, 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 and it's continuous. Is there any way to stop this?
Did you call in a complaint to the police department?
No, I haven't.
So what Rachel's talking about, so the area where Rachel lives, like she said, is Hickory Lane. I've also had from other residents as well, the AmeriHealth construction begins around 6:30, 6:15. They might not actually be physically might not actually physically be doing work, but they're revving up engines. There's machinery that's starting up. So I guess it's a two-part question. The first one is there an ordinance that states that they can't start before 7 o'clock? And the second thing is, can we send our code enforcement people out there to make sure that they are starting after 7 o'clock?
Well,
Those are the two issues.
we can send the police department over there because Andy's not gonna be in at that time. And we can inform BPG to let AmeriHealth know that they can, if they want to congregate on site before work hours start, that's one thing. They can't be moving equipment around and starting diesel engines that time of day. It's the same. It's like having that generator run again at that time of day.
So
Absolutely.
the answer is yes and yes. And Mr. Neese, if you could at least have Andy advise them of the situation. And then Rachel, I would say that if it continues, please notify the police and they can go over there and deal with it. But there shouldn't be any start of any motors, engines, backup alarms, or anything before 7 a.m.
I can't understand how come the beeping is continuous. I thought machinery, when it backs up, it beeps. It
Now,
never
some
stops.
of the lifts that they use there could constantly beep when the lift is engaged. In other words, if they've got one of those outdoor high reaches that are working up the side of the building, when that high reach is deployed, the beeping sound will go off.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you hearing me.
You're welcome.
Mr. Neese.
Have a good evening. Pardon?
We can't hear Mr. Neese.
Sorry about that. I did hear that, and I will follow up with Andy in the morning as well as letting the officers know.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Rich, do we have any other public comment?
That is the only public comment I see.
All right, moving on then. We are going to move on to minutes. Next on the agenda, item 8.1 is consider approving the minutes from the April 13th, 2020 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written or consideration of any changes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Roberts Lightcap, seconded by Supervisor Altieri to approve the minutes from the April 13th, 2020 meeting as written. Any further questions or discussions from members of the board? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, we have two resolutions. First one is consider approving resolution 2020-17, which is Children's Mental Health Awareness Week, May 3rd through May 9th. Mr. Partridge.
Okay, resolution 2020-17, Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. Whereas good mental health is a key component in a child's healthy development, and Child's Mental Health Week provides the opportunity to focus on this important matter while celebrating the accomplishments of children and families affected by mental health concerns. And whereas, according to the United States Department of Health and Human Services, 1 in 5 children is diagnosed with a mental health condition. And whereas, research has shown early identification and appropriate treatment of mental health disorders among children and adolescents provide them better opportunities to lead full and productive lives. And whereas, children and youth with mental health challenges and their families benefit from access to timely services and supports that are family-driven, youth-guided, and culturally appropriate. They also benefit from the integration of behavioral health in primary care, education, and child welfare. And whereas it is important that children and adolescents, along with their families and communities, learn about warning signs of mental health disorder and where to obtain necessary assistance and treatment. And whereas obtaining a full and accurate diagnosis of a child requires gathering information from diverse sources, including the family, school, and others involved with the child. And now, therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Supervisors of the Township of Newtown does hereby acknowledge May 3rd through May 9th, 2020 as Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. Resolved this 27th day of April, 2020, and that's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve resolution 2020-17, recognizing Children's Mental Health Awareness Week. Any further questions from members of the board on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is resolution 2020-18, which is National Police Week, May 10th to the 16th, and Peace Officers Memorial Day on May 15th. Mr. Partridge.
Okay. Resolution number 2020-18, National Police Week, May 10th to May 16th, 2020, and Peace Officers Memorial Day, May 15th, 2020. Whereas since the beginning of law enforcement within this Commonwealth, hundreds of police officers have made the ultimate sacrifice while in the line of duty. And whereas these officers risk their lives every day to protect our communities, and their bravery and selfless services shall not be overlooked by a grateful nation. And whereas across the United States, the week of May 10th through May 16th, 2020 will be recognized as National Police Week. And whereas the first National Peace Officers Memorial Day was held on May 15th, 1982, following a proclamation signed by President John F. Kennedy on October 1st, 1961, and has continued to be observed annually in memory of those police officers who made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty. And whereas that the Senate honor the memory of the hundreds of police officers who have given their lives in the line of duty in this Commonwealth, and whereas that the Senate recognized the week of May 10th through May 16th, 2020 as National Police Week and May 15th, 2020 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in Pennsylvania. Now therefore, be it resolved, the Board of Supervisors of the Township of Newtown does hereby acknowledge May 10th through May 16th, 2020 as National Police Week and May 15th, 2020 as Peace Officers Memorial Day in Pennsylvania. Resolved this 27th day of April 2020, and that's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve Resolution 2020-18, recognizing National Police Week and Peace Officers Memorial Day. Any further questions from members of the board?
I just have one. I obviously am in favor of this, but shouldn't whereas clause 5 and 6 say that the Township of Newtown and not the Senate? We're not urging the Senate to recognize it. We ourselves are doing it.
You are absolutely correct, Mr. Altieri. Thank you very much for pointing that out. We'll get that changed. Any further questions on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda is item 10, which is a presentation from our engineer on the MS4 program. At this point, we'll turn it over to Eileen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hope this works. I don't know if I'm going to get the visuals going. I can walk through
Eileen,
it somewhat.
you're gonna need to start your video so that you can share your screen. And you need to, when you go to share your screen, it'll give you options as to what you're gonna share, and then you can click on that so that everybody can see it.
Okay. It's not letting me start video. Hold on a sec.
You were on earlier. We saw you earlier when we were setting up.
No. Am I there yet?
Let me see Leonard.
Yeah.
Leonard, yep.
Okay, there I am. So
There you
new
are.
share. As soon as I go to share, it kicked me out of video.
Okay, so go ahead and select what it is that you want to share.
It just keeps looping me back to not being able to share it.
All right. Is it one of the documents that's been included in the packet?
Where I'm going to focus most of my attention is the memo with the EAC comments
Yep.
and the BMP cost estimate. If I just give a recap, if you recall back in February, I gave an update to the pollution reduction plan as a result of DEP's comments from our original submission. We had a series of presentations that build up to the preparation of the original plan for submission in September of 2018. DEP reviewed that plan and provided comments for us to address, which in effect pulled back into the township's responsibility all of the developments that had NPDES construction permits. We thought that they could be exempted, and DEP informed us that only people that had industrial discharge permits were exempted. So bringing all of those totals back in, the 10 square mile township is divided into two watersheds, both Crum and Darby Creek. The Crum Creek watershed had an increase in total suspended solids of almost 600,000 pounds of sediment. Darby Creek had an increase in the township's responsibility of almost that identical amount. We were able to deduct from those totals, the sediment removal that's achieved by existing best management practices that we track through the ordinance process for new developments, which brought us to presenting yet again the primary installation for achieving the 10% reduction in sediment from an overall standpoint in the township was stream restoration. We put that plan together, and that was what was presented at the first February meeting. There is a requirement for a 30-day minimum public comment period. During that period, which was extended due to getting things on the website viewing, the EAC presented comments, which I have basically in the memo dated April 9th, in front of you right now, restated the comments for the board consideration and provided a little background information along with each of those. One of the biggest points raised in their comments was that we focused all of our attention on the one method and not any of the others that are offered to us. It was our understanding at the time that DEP wanted something that was not just achievable, but very specifically identified. In speaking further with them, they have confirmed that we can list what we could refer to as Plan B items, such as tree planting, rain garden installation, water quality inlets. There's a whole, a laundry list of items that we could propose. So we have incorporated currently into the plan the methods that are already being entertained by the EAC with respect to rain gardens and tree planting. But another one of their comments was about engaging everyone in the process, which we are completely in favor of. Get much better results when you hear all information from everyone. Can you scroll down, Stephen?
You want me to keep going?
Right, this page is good. This lists the 6 minimum control measures, 2 of which Cindy already talked about, being public education and outreach, public involvement, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction site stormwater runoff control, post-construction stormwater runoff in new developments and redevelopments, and pollution prevention and good housekeeping. In response to the comment about engaging more, we envision a very heavy emphasis on items or MCM 1, 2, and 6. Advertised meetings for the preparation of the PRP implementation process would be a wonderful way to engage the public. If we're talking about the master plan for Greer Park, let's say, having an opportunity to incorporate stormwater into that master planning effort and raising awareness of stormwater that way, because we know absolutely, as we've talked over the last several months, everything is somewhat inextricably tied to stormwater in some fashion. So we firmly believe that running through that process with advertised meetings and as much outreach as we can afford through working with the EAC and just the township as a whole is a great opportunity. As Cindy brought up, we have other areas we're investigating that could achieve the same result as far as trying to get as much public input as possible. The next comment related to adjusting the plan to incorporate. Initially, I think the comment said 500 trees, but we've actually increased that to 1,000. And as I mentioned before, these are in the plan at present. We're intending to add additional items that have come to light, like water quality inlets and just other things that we see as potential over the next 5-year period to have this part of the implementation plan. Broader approach. Some of these things are certainly not within my purview, but they're appropriate to mention. Pursuing land protection and acquisition. The EAC has asked in their comments for the township to selectively obtain permanent easements on parcels of land that significantly contribute to sensitive areas, such as the headwaters of Fox's Run, Hunter's Run, and other first order streams and unnamed tributaries, adopt an official map, and adopt an open space financing mechanism. My only comment with respect to open space financing mechanisms is that there is a form of that currently contained inside the subdivision and land development ordinance, which requires developers to either donate ground for open space and recreation purposes, or provide for a fee in lieu of based on a formula within the ordinance for that to be accomplished. So not that that's the be all and end all. There could be other funding mechanisms, but there is a form of one in place at present. Next item. I provided no comment for that. The next one that I have comments about, fully utilize stormwater ordinances to support effective stormwater management. Review and update stormwater ordinances, policies, and implementation, strengthen ordinances to include properties that predate current stormwater ordinances and reflect new weather patterns. Enforce all stormwater flood zone, riparian buffer, and steep slope ordinances. Educate township personnel, etc., planning board and zoning board, and ensure that existing stormwater BMPs are functioning as designed. Here, I went on to just explain a little bit about what is currently being enforced. We have the painful process in some cases of everything down to 500 square feet of new impervious or replacement impervious surface that requires some form of stormwater management, an easement of sorts, and a maintenance and operations agreement to be not just signed but recorded at the recorder of deeds so that that carries on with the property forever. It doesn't just apply to an existing owner. With respect to inclusion of properties that predate the stormwater ordinance, that would be something that would need to be reviewed by the solicitor. I'm not sure that legally we could go back other than with the existing requirements that make you consider existing surfaces as meadow in the pre-developed condition, even if they're paved currently. There's minor things within the ordinance that result in a conservative result for stormwater controls, but I don't know that we could en masse require that. We currently enforce all floodplain, riparian buffer, steep slope ordinance ordinances between our office and code enforcement, unless waived by the board in some fashion. And in conjunction with Public Works, we have conducted periodic sessions about stormwater and very specifically the good housekeeping measures in the minimum control measure number 6. That is all on the township. And we could do that for any other boards. That's completely at the board's, discretion and authorization. We also, along with the stormwater operations and maintenance agreement for anything over 1,000 square feet, require a fee to be submitted for inspections to be carried out for 10 years to ensure the proper functioning of those controls that have been put on private property. One of the things that we were able to calculate here is that the overall burden by tracking those items on private properties and what pollution reduction they achieve, we've been able to eliminate over 124,000 pounds of sediment from the township's responsibility for having to remove 12,200 or 420 pounds. If you scroll down a little further, Stephen. Engage residents as stewards of our community. Again, these are all wonderful ideas and would love to work closely with the EAC on that as desired. Look for opportunities to piggyback MS4 projects on other construction projects. The road program that was just put out to bid, we proposed porous pavement for the bike lanes that are going along Campus Boulevard, Stony Brook, and Troop Farm, and got an actual price for that, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about in a second when I do the cost comparison. We're also, in any project that we put together, currently working on the Clearbrook Culvert, we're always looking for environmentally friendly ways to do things when it is appropriate cost-wise. That should be, those results should be within the next 3 weeks to find out where we stand with that. Pursue grants that could lessen the township expense. That's also, there's a number of grant opportunities that we've identified in the PRP. And the remainder of the comments are just for the board to consider with respect to budgeting, township arborist position, and a comprehensive digital inventory to monitor condition of trees on properties. So, Stephen, if you could switch to the BMP cost comparison. I'm not going to go over this in incredible detail, but I wanted, might be better if you can increase that size. I just wanted to show a few examples of BMPs and their sediment removal effectiveness, along with an estimate of their costs, just to give you an idea of the price per pound and why we basically focus so much on the stream restoration category. If you look at permeable pavement, the actual cost from a bid, and this was at the low bidder, was 1.67 million to remove a total of 9,800 pounds per year of sediment. The cost for removal is $169 a pound, which would mean that we'd have to then this column for amount required to achieve the 10% reduction. It would take 49 miles of porous bike lanes at 27 feet wide in order to achieve that 10% reduction that we have to in 5 years. With respect to rain gardens, again, these costs are based on grant dollars that the EAC has obtained. Pretty good cost for a pound of removal of sediment, but we'd have to find locations for 305 rain gardens in order to achieve, and they would have to collect a half an acre of impervious coverage as well to achieve the total reduction. The stream restoration, as we presented previously, carries with it cost for removal of $5.57 per pound, and we're proposing approximately 5,600 feet to get that. I think we have two different categories of tree planting listed here because the effectiveness table provides for when you are going into, as people describe it, a sea of asphalt, let's say a parking facility that had no landscape islands of any kind. There would be an opportunity to plant trees and remove impervious coverage. And you can see that the 1,000 trees would eliminate approximately 3,600 pounds of sediment per year at a cost of approximately $100,000 or per pound $27.19. When you are planting in grass, you get less of a credit. So this all boils down to the prescribed effectiveness from DEP standards. So I hope that answers your question, Cindy. That pretty much wraps up my presentation unless anyone has any specific questions. I know you've been riveted.
Does any board members have any questions specifically for Eileen on this item?
Eileen, it's Tina. I have a question about the easements that you spoke about at some of the, I forget what the term you used for the streams like Lewis Run and can you just explain that quickly? Do you know what I'm referring to?
I do. I believe it was one of the EAC's comments, and there are a number of tributary streams that run through private properties where the township would have to obtain an easement to do any work in those corridors as far as reshaping or restoring, quote unquote, those stream reaches. It would need to be provided an easement because they run through private properties. Whereas we propose that the stream restoration we do is in public lands in the parks that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Eileen, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I guess everybody should understand that we are doing this because we're required by federal and state law to, reduce a certain amount of our sediment and load. It's coming from the township. I guess not just sediment load, but pollutants. The way we can achieve that is through sediment load. And the stream restoration gives us the most bang for the buck, if you will. It gives us the most removal of sediment at the lowest per pound sediment cost. Is that correct?
That's correct. That was why I did the comparison table. The effectiveness table is very difficult to read, especially for a layman, but the presentation here kind of just gives a sampling of them and just what you can get from them. Because this is an unfunded mandate, as the whole program has been since 2003, our goal was to try and achieve the result that we wanted for the least amount of cost.
And over the next 5 years, we've got to reduce 10%, if I read that correctly.
Correct,
So, okay.
correct.
So now, later on in the agenda, under new business 15.4, we have to adopt a resolution to, or consider adopting a resolution to approve the MS4 plan. What exactly are we voting on? And maybe Steve chimes in on that, or maybe you can answer that.
No, exactly what we put together is the stream restoration for the 4 locations, and we've added our Plan B because we cannot be certain that they'll all be accomplished. But the Plan B includes planting of 1,000 trees, and the sediment removal will be dependent on where they're placed, whether they're put in a grassy area or as a parking spot that can be removed with trees planted there.
Okay.
Along with, as I mentioned, water quality inlets. We have a few other items that we believe just through repairs that Public Works has to do, you know, other things that the EAC wants to get involved in, other grant opportunities, maybe one of the park designs incorporate something that we can get credits for as well. So just trying to be mindful of those and keeping those in. We're going to have a laundry list of Plan B items and the stream restoration as the major effort.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would make note that Cindy Mahalo has raised her hand. I think she would like to either ask some additional questions. I'm going to go ahead and unmute her. Is this the appropriate time?
Yeah, that's fine, I think.
Cindy, you should be able to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for that presentation, Eileen. And I just wanted to say thanks to the board and Eileen for the EAC being able to comment during the comment period and your consideration of the letter and the ideas that we submitted. As I look at the agenda and the documents that are attached there, I don't see the PRP plan that will actually be submitted to the DEP, or am I missing it? Which document is the summary of the plan?
I don't see it there.
Is that something that if
There-
that's what
these
the
are
board is going to approve, is that something that they and the EAC can see before it's submitted to the DEP?
Yeah, I don't know why it's not on here. We did have you're talking about the narrative portion?
Yes, because you mentioned that there would be a Plan B attached with it. So I think it would be helpful for people to be able to see the document, the narrative that is going to be going to the DEP.
Yeah, I guess that was some of my point, Eileen. I guess I think what the board needs is the actual plan of what it actually is that we are approving, which I don't see that we have. We have a lot of components of it, and some of us understand it, but I think we need to see a final document, if you will, whether it's a report or a series of reports, wherever that is going to be submitted to DEP, either our proposal or our plan or whatever that may be.
Yeah, I know the loading calculations are here and they will be part of the plan. The stream
Right.
restoration maps are, and so is the outfall. We'll include the EAC comments. I don't know that I need to give them the BMP cost estimate, but the drainage map and the land use map are parts of it also. The only thing missing here is the narrative. Okay.
Great, thank you. And then I did have a question on the effectiveness chart with the costs.
Uh-huh.
And maybe I'm just not reading it correctly, but when I compare the 2 tree planting items, and the first one assumes removal of impervious surface, which I would think would be removing concrete, which would be I would think that would be more expensive. And yet it says it's $27 per pound, and the one underneath it is planting trees and grass, which says it's $47 per pound. To me, that just seems the reverse of what I would think it would be.
As I mentioned, the numbers are based on, if you look under the category of sediment removal, 1,000 trees removes 3,678
Oh, I get it.
pounds.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that because you're taking up that impervious surface, the ground can absorb more around that tree.
Mhm.
And with the tree, you're getting more sediment removal accomplished removing impervious than planting one in grass.
Okay.
And that's why the cost per pound goes down for the ones that, yeah, it does look counterintuitive, but it's not.
Great. Okay.
Again, more bang for the buck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I could just make a comment on this, I think this is helpful to see the point that the different methods of removals obviously have different relative costs for the sediment that they remove. And we were very cognizant of that in the comment letter and in the suggestions we made. But I think our point was that just as the environment is a holistic system in which you can't really look at one single element without it having an impact on other areas, we were concerned that by focusing exclusively on trying to restore, let's say, a stretch of a stream, if you can imagine in Brookside Park, you could spend all this money repairing, Fox's Run down in Brookside Park. But if you're not concurrently reducing the volume and the intensity of the water that's coming down into that stream, if you don't remediate that at the same time, you're simply subjecting that stream to the same impact. And that by doing things concurrently, like upstream rain gardens and upstream tree planting and culverts and things like that, that they can have a synergistic effect on the stream restoration and then also protect the stream restoration in the long run. So that was our thinking behind that. And the other point I just wanted to make is, well, when you look at tree planting, for example, and if you solely look at the cost of that and you don't take a holistic view, you can lose sight of some of the other benefits that tree planting provides. Tree planting provides a number of aesthetic benefits, health benefits by removing pollutants. Trees provide economic benefits. There have been studies that shown that people make bigger purchases and shop more in districts that have trees with their retail establishments. So I would just encourage the decisions to be made by taking a holistic view and looking beyond just the cost to say what economic, health, or environmental benefits might also be achieved with the same removal method.
Cindy, we appreciate all that, and it's all good information, and that's why we really value what the EAC provides us. But don't misunderstand, this is not an environmental blueprint for the township. This is strictly directed to meet our obligations under the state and federal laws. I agree with a lot of what you say, but we don't get credits on an economic standpoint for planting trees and things like that. It just simply isn't in the program that says that the state will give us credit because they get economic benefits from the trees. They only give us points, if you will, for certain aspects. So, in fairness to the residents and in the amount of money that we have to spend for this, we try to find the biggest bang, if we will, for our dollars spent to satisfy the regulations of the DEP, to meet our requirements. Certainly, this is not all we do environmentally, and other things that you brought up are very important. But what this plan, what we specifically are voting on, is what we need to do to meet state and federal requirements for this particular pollutant discharge elimination system. That's what we're really focusing on.
I see. Mhm.
Eileen, is there a deadline on when we have to vote on this by?
We got an extension till April 30th.
And in today's day and age, is that really a meaningful deadline?
I don't believe that.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that, I think the board would feel more comfortable. We actually had the narrative and the document, the whole document or whatever it is that you're going to present directly to DEP. If we had that to vote on, I think that would be helpful. I would feel uncomfortable not, voting, not voting on, I'd feel uncomfortable voting without that, I guess, for the chance for the board and the EAC to review. It's just from that whole document. I mean, it doesn't have to be a cumbersome document. We all know what the attachments are going to be, and you can reference those accordingly. We've already seen them now, but if we had the written narrative to go with everything, I think that would be very helpful in allowing us to actually vote on this particular item.
Mr. Chairman, I think Eileen's, well, maybe she's back, but I can reach out to Ms. Mahoney at DEP and request that we be able to submit everything after the next meeting, if you're comfortable with that.
I am, and I think that's the way to go. I just feel more comfortable voting on the actual document itself. And I understand it, I think, as well as anyone else does it. But I just, want to make sure that everyone else on the board, EAC, everyone understands exactly what it is that we're submitting. And I can't imagine that, given the situation that we're in right now, where deadlines seem to be meaningless, that the DEP is going to do something. And even though they are they going to do? Slap our wrists? So I think if you could let them know that we're going to have this available after our first May meeting, I think that'd be the way to go.
And I'll have that out to everybody, including the EAC. I'll send it to Bruce and Cindy before the end of the week.
Yeah, if you could make sure that happens, that'd be great. And then if we could add that as an agenda item on the next meeting, Mr. Neese, I think that'd be the way to go.
We'll do that. And as soon as Eileen releases it, we'll put it on the website for anyone else who wants to see it as well.
Thank you. Is there any board member who disagrees with that approach?
No.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Eileen on this item? All right. Seeing none, we'll move ahead to reports. We have reports, and again, these are all listed, at least 11.1 through 11.8 are all attached. I'm not expecting that we're going to ask for a verbal summary of the report. If there's any board member as we go down this that has a question on a particular report, certainly let's handle that. But we have in our packets, we have a report 11.1 from the police department. We have report 11.2 from the fire department. 11.3 is the report from Chief Laws for the ambulance. 11.4 is the report from George Sheriff from Public Works. 11.5 is a report from Andy Redcheck regarding building codes. 11.6 is the report from our finance manager, Rich Lafayette. 11.7 is the report from the EAC. And 11.8 is our leisure services report from Rich Enow. I know many members have already had a chance to review them and had comments. Does any board member have any questions on any of those reports?
No, I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank George publicly. He was on the phone with me yesterday on a Sunday, going through a few things. So I just wanted to thank him publicly. There was an issue with a sign on one of the streets that we have here that's being rectified. And then additionally, as contained inside his report, he did expand on the bike lanes that the township will be installing as part of the road program on Campus Boulevard, Stony Brook Drive, and Troop Farm. And then I did just want to also reiterate that 11.1, which contained the report from the EAC regarding their year in review, is where we got the information for the vacancy on the EAC. So thank you to everyone who submitted their reports.
Thank you, Mr. Altieri, and thank you, George, for your continual efforts. I appreciate that. I know we all do. Any other questions for any items 11.1 through 11.8? All right, moving on to 11.9, we have the report from Eileen. Eileen, you had some follow-up things for us, I guess. If you can give us an update, that'd be great.
The Goddard School drainage issue has been resolved. The
Don't I know it?
contract, I'm sorry, what?
I said, don't I know it? Those vacuum excavators are loud, and they were loud, but anyhow, go ahead.
They had to do a little reconnaissance in the beginning. So they showed up on site on Tuesday, trying to figure out what they did, and uncovered the end of the pipe, added a new inlet and extended between the two locations. It was approximately 20 feet of pipe that they installed, and we had them vacuum and televise the line to make sure that it runs all the way from Elgin through to Ellis. So that's thankfully completed. With respect to the inlet repair and road program projects, we have all the submittals back from the inlet program contractor and have all the contract documents. We can submit tomorrow for the PennDOT project approval. We have a few pieces of paperwork that are necessary for the inlet program before we can take that step. I mean, for the road program, we want the inlet program actually to get going ahead of the road program because there are inlets that need to be repaired prior to us milling and resurfacing. But those are in process, and that is all I have unless anybody has any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Eileen?
Again, question, just wanted to say thank you for getting on top of the Goddard School after the meeting that we had 2 weeks ago. I know that the Flynns are extremely appreciative of it.
I think the contractor was afraid to move forward with the COVID restrictions, and we got together rather quickly and figured that this would qualify in a life safety matter as an exemption. So they were actually ready to go because they couldn't do any other work.
No, I appreciate it, Eileen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eileen, I have a question with regard to the road program and the inlet. And I can't remember, when we approved all this, do we have a schedule of exactly which roads that are going to be completed first and how long all of this takes? Do we have a schedule?
We do not yet have a schedule from Glasgow. That would be something we'd address at the pre-construction meeting. Currently, we just have them, they submitted their COVID plan to be sure they're meeting, you know, all the proper protections for their workers and documentation of people on site. But we, in the contract, gave a 120-day period for the 11 miles to be paved. So we're going to work in conjunction with the inlets getting done out ahead of them. So that schedule is going to be somewhat dictated by the inlet program contractor getting completed developments, basically.
To do his presentation.
Well, Eileen, you will get a schedule from the contractor and you will provide that to the board?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions for Eileen? Seeing none, moving on to Mr. Neese. Mr. Neese, the man behind the mask.
Yes, and I am wearing a mask because I'm sharing a room with someone else here at the Township building. And we're just practicing being safe in that area. So a couple quick things. I sent out to the board this afternoon SAP's latest response to us. I'll be honest, I haven't had a lot of chance to look at it. And regarding the generator, they are working with some sound deadening pieces, as well as doing, I believe, looking at some alternative fuel sources to help address some of the unstableness in the PICO provided power. I would take any comment from the board related to that so I can get back to them. Like I said, I've not had a chance to really spend a lot of time studying it today, but I did get it this afternoon. But I will look at it. I might suggest that one or two board members work with me on that if the board is willing, and that we would continue to move forward, just so I can have some input from what the board is looking for.
Yeah, since we just got it this afternoon, I would think that the board needs some time to digest that. And you know, then we can get back to you and see where we're going with this. But I guess my own personal opinion and the quickness that I read it was I was expecting a little bit more from SAP on this. So I think we need to, you know, keep the heat on and apply some more pressure to get this issue resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with John. I mean, I got the email late because it went into my junk account, so I didn't know about it until it was brought up. But I think that it is fitting to say that the response itself was completely underwhelming. I don't think that they really addressed the issue at all. He talks about fluctuation in power. I understand that, but the situation which brought this up in the first place was 3 days of continual use when there was no power outages at all. Again, they might think from their side that there was a fluctuation. The PICO line, which seems to be what they're going to be basing a lot of their, if you want to say, defense on. But I think, I mean, I would be involved. I would be interested in being involved in it because, like John said, from my quick, not even quick look at this, but review of this, it's really not a response at all. It's not something I'm satisfied with.
All right, Mr.
All right.
You'll follow up with SAP and please include myself and Mr. Altieri in the follow up. And if we need to, we can meet with them either via Zoom or in person to get some, I guess, better action on this, I'll say.
Got it. Also following up from our last meeting, we had, you had requested that we reach out to Toll Brothers related to both the Ellis Preserve. There's some stormwater issues there and a few other issues that were there. In addition, also related to a few things related with Lister. I will tell you that Eileen and I did, and George, all met out at the site with two members from Toll Brothers. We have walked the site, addressed a few of the areas. They were putting a plan together and are addressing particularly right away some things that we saw related to stormwater. There is a section further down on the trail that we believe potentially is beyond the impact coming off of their property. We're not 100% sure. And so, and Eileen can correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that the impact is more coming off of the roadway potentially than coming from the actual place where the townhomes are. But when I'm talking about the roadway, there's a perimeter road that goes around the back of the SAP property. Well, it's the Ellis Preserve property back to the back where SAP is. And it washes out a spot on our trail on a pretty regular basis. And so I've requested for Eileen to put a proposal together for us to take a look and first of all determine if it's where the issue's coming from so that we know the proper way to address that going forward. And I know that she's going to be working on that and getting that to us for that purpose. Related, I've had a couple of conversations also related to the swamp house. I got an email late last week from the historical society. They've asked me for some information so that before they respond, and I have not had a chance to pull that information together. I will get that information out to them hopefully tomorrow or Wednesday, and hopefully we'll have a response back from them. And in light of that, I think that as we've taught, as the chairman mentioned, Mr. Nawn mentioned earlier, I believe we're setting up a meeting with the HOA to discuss a little about that particular spot as well, just to get a better understanding. Those are the two things that I have at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Neese?
I do, John. Stephen, with the proposal from Eileen for where our trail gets washed out on,
Yes.
I'm not sure why. I mean, I understand because our trailer is getting washed out, but I'm not sure why we're paying for an investigation when it's clearly coming from someone else's property. How do we get that money back, or don't we?
Well, I think there's two things. One is we've got a couple challenges there. One is the fact that we have an easement to have the trail and maintain the trail, but it's not necessarily our property. But I think what the purpose is to find, is the best way to say it, and Eileen, you may want to chime in, is the best way to determine where the water's coming from. And at that point, we would then go back to that group, whether it's Toll Brothers at that point, or whether it's Equus, and ask for them to come up with a solution, and then ask for them to potentially pay for the study that was done.
To reimburse the township.
To reimburse the township.
Okay, we'll just have to keep that in mind then.
Yes.
So our expenditure, our study is minimal at best, just to simply determine where the water's coming from.
That's the goal, is to understand really what's causing what's happening there, just enough so that we can decide, we want to make sure we're approaching, we keep getting fingers pointed back and forth. We got to determine what the real issue is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Neese? Mr. Neese, you'll keep these two items on the agenda and report next meeting to us?
I will.
Sorry to make you put your mask back on. All right, next on the agenda, we have item 12.1 is consider approving Alexis Soukas to the Finance Committee. Mr. Altieri.
I would like to, you want me to say something before I make the motion? Is that why I was called on? Well, I'll make the motion and then I'll do something in discussion.
That's fine. I think it's the best plan. Go ahead.
So I'll make the motion to approve 12.1.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is made by Supervisor Altieri, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve Alexis Soukas to the Finance Committee. Before we ask for a vote, Mr. Altieri, you wanted to make some comments?
Yeah, I will just make a brief comment. So he goes by Alex Soukas. I actually met Alex, I guess about four and a half years ago from the school district. He was a very active parent, still is a very active parent in terms of Culbertson Elementary School, but also an active participant and frequent member in the audience over at the school board meetings. He is an attorney. He used to be a partner over at King and Spalding in New York City doing personal injury. He has gone above and beyond for a lot of the stuff that he's done on behalf of the school district. And I know that he's going to do a pretty good job being a member of the Finance Committee here. So I think it's really a great move for all of us here.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the appointment of Alex Soukas? Seeing none, motion was made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
And I just made in the legal field, I just made a very egregious mistake and I mischaracterized the practice of law that he did. He wasn't personal injury, he was intellectual property. So I apologize for that.
Wow.
And as such, I will also just mention that he's barred in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, 4 federal district courts and the United States Patent and Trademark Office. So you're welcome.
That's two big distinctions there, personal injury and intellectual.
Major difference, major difference.
All right, no further issues on that item. We'll move on to item 13.1. I had the opportunity before this evening's meeting to review the checks on check register dated April 27th, 2020, in the amount of $159,830.56. And it is my motion that we approve those bills. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion was seconded by Supervisor Roberts Lightcap. Any further questions or discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the bills, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, item 14.1, ordinances. We have ordinance 2020-01, which is the incurrence of non-electoral general obligation debt through the Delaware Valley Region Finance Authority. And I believe we talked about this last meeting, but I will let Mr. Neese give us some further explanation.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Catania may want to say something before I speak much to it, but the purpose of this debt is twofold. One would be that it would refinance I don't know the exact amount right now, but roughly the amount that we took out in 2016, which was 9.5 million. I think we're somewhere in the 9 million range. You don't pay much off in the beginning, just like a house, but we can't actually do that refinancing until the end of 2021. So we would have about a 1.5 year period where we were covering both notes, but even with that, we would save just about $1 million on those because of the interest rate. I will tell you that there is an interest rate that will lock in first thing tomorrow morning. But right now, I believe as of today, we were actually a little better than the rates that I had quoted you last week or 2 weeks ago, although they went up again a little bit, but it was 0.77 and 1.01 or something like that. They're both very low. And the second financing, which is all being treated as one, is $2.5 million that we're putting towards the road program. And this is allowing us to keep some cash free and clear at this point to manage through what we got going on, obviously right now, but also at that low interest rate, it just seemed to make sense. And
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Roberts Lightcap to approve item 14.1, which is ordinance 2020-01. Again, I'm not cutting anybody else. Is there any further questions or discussions on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. Motion carries unanimously. Well done, Mr. Neese, on obtaining some ridiculously low financing numbers. That's great. All right, moving on to new business. First is consider the proposal from Republic Services to renew the contract for trash removal at 209 Bishop Hollow Road for 2 years. Mr. Neese.
So this contract, you have this is the proposal. I was looking for the amount and I don't see it on here. This is for your trash service that gets picked up here at the Township building, and it's a 2-year contract, and I believe it's I'm really drawing a blank right at the moment. I wonder, looking to see if George is still on. He is.
He's still on here as an attendee, yes.
Whoops.
Hey, Steve?
Yes.
Yeah, so the amount is $379.73 a month.
Okay.
How's that compare with our current rate?
It's very close to it, actually.
So you're saying there's an increase, but it's a very minimal increase.
Exactly. I can try to look for that figure, what it is right now, but it's right in the ballpark of what it is now.
And you think this is the way to go? You would, you're recommending we approve this?
It is my recommendation, yeah, for a 2-year.
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve the proposal from Republic Services to renew the contract for trash collection at the Township Building for 2 years. Any further
Just-
questions or discussions from members of the board on this item?
Mr. Chairman, just for the general edification of the board and the public, it's $4,556.76 per year.
Okay. Seeing no questions, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next is item 15.2, which is discussion about the $350 payment made to the Historical Society for the 25th Historic Newtown Square Day program on June 6th, which obviously has been canceled.
Yes.
Mr. Neese, I assume the question is, do we ask for the money back or just tell them to hold it till next year?
So they've sent us a letter with 3 options. The 3 options, one is to request a check back, as you mentioned. One is to let them hold it and it would be applied to next year's, or of course their third, and the one probably that they're preferring would be that it would be a donation.
I favor a donation.
Yeah, I favor
I'd
donation.
be okay with that too. Somebody want to offer a motion on that?
I'll offer it. So move to donate the $350 to the Historical Society.
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to consider the $350 payment made to the Historical Society a donation. Any further questions from members of the board on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 15.3, consider approving the annual maintenance contract with Pathcom for service to our phone system, $4,350 per year per staff's recommendation. Mr. Neese.
Again, this is a pretty typical contract. It's up a little bit because we've added the voice over IP phones, as you recall, as part of this. I think it went up probably about $400, $500 because of that. But we added, I think it was 8 phones, 15, total 15 phones to the system. And because it was voice over IP, they're actually a little bit more expensive per phone, but it provides for the maintenance and any upkeep we need on the system.
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Altieri to approve the annual maintenance contract with Pathcom to service our phone system in the amount of $4,350 per year. Any further questions from the board on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 15.4 is consider approving the Township Pollution Reduction Plan. As we've already discussed that at length, I would like to table this item until our next meeting unless somebody strenuously objects. All right. Under old business, item 16.
Now we have 15.5 now.
You are absolutely right, Mr. Altieri. I forgot. I couldn't write it on my iPad where I'm reading the agenda from. So item 15.5 is consider advertising for the vacant position on the EAC.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve the advertisement for the vacant position on the Environmental Advisory Commission. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Neese, I'm assuming you will put that on our website. We will collect resumes and we'll get some board members to do some interviews.
Yes, we'll also advertise it in the paper like we do every other one like that.
And I believe Mr. Altieri and Mr. Russo will be doing the interviews.
I believe that's true.
Fantastic. All right, now I'll move on to item 16.1 under old business, discussion about the tree ordinance. And I think I'll turn it over to our solicitor, Mr. Catania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I met with, virtually met with George Sharretts and the Township Manager, Mr. Neese, regarding the last proposed, the tree ordinance that was proposed by, who was it, Steve? I forget.
EAC,
It was the EAC, but there was a gentleman.
Henry
Oh,
Bryan.
Harry Bryant.
Right. And we looked over the ordinance, and it was all encompassing. And we decided among the three of us that the three areas that we should be most concerned with were trees along roadways and or on our public lands, tree removal, and the effect on stormwater. And what was brought up was an instance where there was a lot of trees being cleared, and we had no avenue for limiting the number of trees that were being cleared and its effect on stormwater. So we thought that this ordinance should cover at least those two areas. They do cover an area with something called a heritage tree, which is mostly trees that are more than 3 feet in diameter, and it's more of a preservation, or if you're going to cut it down, someone's got to look at it. The EAC, as you know, was pushing for this for not just for these reasons, but it's a requirement to become a tree city, I believe.
Yes.
That there be a tree ordinance, and that we have a township arborist, which is required. The ordinance, the way it stands, creates another commission, the tree commission, or it allows the Board of Supervisors to act in that capacity. There was one other area that what we were doing is looking for the board to give us some guidance on which way you want us to go. The fourth area was an area of concern where the township would be permitted to go on private property. If there was a tree that was a hazard of falling and causing injury to property or life or people or whatever. The problem with that is that if the township or a person designates it and they can't afford to take the tree down, the township can go in at its expense, take the tree down, and ask the resident to reimburse them. If the reimbursement can't take place, then all we do is lien the property. We were playing that situation all the way through, and that could be something that gets expensive, number one. And number two, if we're required to do that, there could be some kickback liability to the township for something that comes down where we don't deem it should come down. So I also sent out a copy of a tree ordinance from the EAC in Springfield Township, just as an example of what another township did. So we're just looking for some guidance on what areas you want us to address in the ordinance.
So Joe, I just have a question on trees that are cleared on private property. What's the mechanism? Is that if, for example, if a neighbor has 8 trees on the property and they take them all down, is that do they have to get a permit to get the trees down? I mean,
it depends on what they're designated. If they're hazard trees, there's a much shorter time frame to go in there, because obviously because they're going to come down.
Right.
Any other trees, they're looking for a permit from the township to take other trees down, hazard trees or not.
Okay.
That's in there as well. So, I guess first our concern is how much do we want to, use the township's resources to go on to private property is number one. And George is more concerned with trees on private property or in the right of way that interfere with the roadways. Those trees that are in the right of way or on private land that affect the property are those trees have to be removed at the expense of the landowner. And if the landowner doesn't do it, the township obviously would do it to remove the tree from the roadway. But any expenses of that would fall on the homeowner.
That makes sense.
Joe,
We did that when I was at SEPTA. We did that for properties that are along the rail line or the high-speed line. I guess the question that I have is if we're telling someone that in order for them to take trees down from their property, they need to go to the township to get a permit. If we don't give them the permit, what is that? Do they appeal it to us? Do they appeal it to the zoning hearing board? Where is that in that ordinance? Because wouldn't that constitute still a taking if we say that they can't take any of those trees down without having an appeal process in there?
Yeah, we didn't work that area through, Len, on the permit process.
Okay.
Anything that the township, but the way it stands the way the ordinance stands right now, if you decide you want to add another commission, it would go in front of that commission first. And then it would go to the Board of Supervisors.
That's if you were to, okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so Joe, this said, my questions around the hazard tree where we go on the private property to remove, due to safety issues or whatever. So how's that decision made? Who makes that decision?
Well, at first it's got to be, in the way the ordinance stands right now, it comes up two ways. One, the township identifies it, or two, comes from the public. Somebody in the public says we want this tree to come down because it's a hazard.
But would the board, who would make the decision to proceed that we're going in to remove this? I mean, would that be a board decision, the administration?
Well, first you get a letter, you have to get something, if I recall right, from the tree arborist,
Mm-hmm.
It's his opinion that this tree should come down because it falls into the definition of a hazard tree.
Right.
That's how it comes up first. And then I think they added a process where they can appeal it if they don't think so. The problem that we were looking at is from a practical standpoint, when does the township decide, because it says the township may go onto the property. When does the township decide when they're going to go onto the property and remove this person's tree, but not that person's tree?
Right.
And number two, we don't know if there's and George indicated that there's much of a cry from the public for this to go on. And wouldn't it be a benefit to a homeowner where they can't afford to get a tree down, but the township will take it down for them and we can't get the money back?
Yeah.
And we can only lien the property.
And that's the biggest problem I had with the ordinance as written. I don't think from a liability standpoint that the township should be undertaking the responsibility to essentially inspect every tree in town, whether it's on public or private property. I'm not so concerned about being overly zealous and taking trees down, and certainly there's a cost associated with it. I'm concerned about the tree that we miss that falls and crushes the house. Has the township now adopted that liability for them? So I am not in favor of anything that permits us or actually requires us to go on the private property to declare a tree hazardous. I think that residents have homeowners insurance. I think there's enough protections in there for everybody that the township could simply stay out of that. Yes, we have a responsibility for the trees on our property. We have a responsibility for trees in our right of way. We've got a responsibility to ensure that trees are something that's important to the township as far as encouraging their planting and making sure that they're not cut down indiscriminately. But from a hazardous tree standpoint, I know I don't want to adopt that liability or responsibility, at least not on private property. The other question I have, more of a question than anything else, is unless we're required by the Arbor Day Foundation or somebody else that we create a separate tree commission, I'm wondering why can't any duties of the tree commission be given to the Environmental Advisory Commission, for instance? Well, why do we have to create yet a separate commission that functions on trees? It seems to me that the trees are a critical part of the environment. Maybe that's something that the Environmental Advisory Commission, who is arguably one of our most active commissions, could take on as a responsibility also.
The actual statute under second-class townships, when I looked at that, it didn't say you couldn't do that. It gave you the option of using the commission, which I don't think there would be a problem to adopting a commission you already have to handle that, or it would be handled by the Board of Supervisors.
Well, I certainly like the idea of having a commission in there. I just don't know that we need to create a new separate commission for that.
No, I don't disagree with that.
Just make the EAC the tree commission also.
Correct. Give them that responsibility, yeah.
Yeah, they hold two responsibilities. But going back to the hazard tree, John, I agree with what John said regarding the hazard tree. I wouldn't want to.
And the EAC guy, I remember in public, he said, if that's a problem, take it out. I don't think they were married to that. I think they just gave us an all-inclusive tree ordinance.
Yeah, I would like the residents that have these hazardous trees to take responsibility for their trees. I don't know why we as the township want to take that responsibility.
Agreed. And I think that again, to what Joe just said about EAC coming up with this ordinance, I think that was the whole purpose of this, was to save trees, not so much to police trees. It was more to save them, so that people just don't come and cut them all down and don't replace them, because it does affect stormwater management. So I agree with John and Ed on that as well.
The other thing I would add is, and Joe, I'm suspecting you're going to have more conversations, because exactly what John just said, the EAC is arguably one of the most active boards. So I don't want to, put more on their plate as they're becoming more involved in community engagement, community education. And we've also asked them to go back to providing the Board of Supervisors with environmental review of different plans that happen. I just don't want to see us pile more onto their plate. If they think that, hey, we're moving in this direction and we have enough on our plate, it would be a benefit for the township to go with creating another commission, and it'd be the tree commission. And I think that should be looked at. So I just want to make sure that we loop them in before we make any decision on that.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like the thing to do. I mean, if Joe's, I'm assuming, taking notes on our comments, is to craft the ordinance based on some of these comments, and then maybe at that point, in addition to sharing with supervisors, we share it with the EAC to get their comments too.
Yeah.
If I could put something together with Steve and George, and I'll shoot it over to EAC for their comments first.
That sounds good.
That's fine with me. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good plan.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Super. With that item being done, we move on to item 17, which is additional business. Does any supervisor have any additional business to bring before the board? Seeing none. Any under item 18, does any board members have any comment to make? Seeing none, we move on to item 19, which is public comment. These are general comments not related to items on the agenda.
I am seeing one from Miss Wilson. Steve, if you could unmute her, that would be great.
Rich, I cannot. You are the host.
All right.
Thanks, Rich. This is Patty Wilson, 4111 Battles Lane. I'm going to start by thanking you all for last month purchasing some open space at the corner of Sawmill and 202 after 252. After many months of requests, and not only is it an awesome thing to do, but it gives you an opportunity on both that plot of land as well as the land the township owns beside it to plant trees to help with your MS4. This brings me to my second comment and opportunity here, that the open space that currently exists or could be open space at the entrance to Newtown Heights that now is the subject of a request for commercial zoning, since we've now created this entrance to the Sawmill area and the Sugar Maple area. I'd love you guys to consider, and Ms. Roberts Lightcap to consider, as a purchase of open space. I understand it would require some eminent domain, the land that currently belongs to the various quarry properties, to create an entrance to the Newtown Heights neighborhood. It would serve two purposes. It would not only reduce traffic on Westchester Pike, give you an opportunity to deal with the stormwater issues in the Heights, but also take away once and for all the concerns that neighborhood has, where I have many friends that we just keep creating problems for them. So I'm going to ask you to look at that as a possible open space eminent domain opportunity. The third thing that I want to bring up is you're very concerned about the SAP generator, but I'd love you to give some consideration to the AmeriHealth building, which undoubtedly will also have generators. And prior to those souping them up, making sure that someone is looking into those as a, let's make sure we've not created a double problem there. And then lastly, I would say, you know, even in my own neighborhood and across the street from me, there is a plot of land that's there as a paper street. It is full of trees. It could become an opportunity, again, to reduce stormwater into Lewis Run. And happy to reach out to Steve to point out where that is, and see if that could also reduce the load with less money associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Rich, I believe I see two other hands.
Yes, next we have up is Cindy.
Hello, this is Cindy Mahalo, 87 Hunters Run. I also wanted to thank the township for purchasing that open space that Patty mentioned at Sawmill Road and Westchester Pike. Every little bit helps. In terms of her mentioning of the township acquiring open space and paper streets, that was actually something that I was trying to convey in the MS4 comment letter, and that was there are other paper streets in the Newtown Heights area, one of which there are some lots in there that are undersized, non-conforming, and basically unbuildable. And one of those lots, for example, came before the zoning hearing board recently, where the owner was trying to build on it. It was clearly unbuildable, not only from size, but from stormwater requirements, and also it was wetlands per the mapping from the state association. And it was also fell in the headwaters of a stream. And that's what our point was, is that if there are areas that are paper streets, unbuildable lots, can't be built on, that perhaps these could be, as Patty mentioned, acquired by the township, set aside to help provide for stormwater management. It's just a different way of trying to achieve that. And my last point is I have a question about the construction, or actually land clearing, that took place last month at the corner of Bishop Hollow Road and Campus Boulevard at a culvert or a storm water feature there. And I was wondering if perhaps Eileen could explain what was happening there and if there will be any vegetation planted on there.
Eileen, are you still on?
I am. I know that the basin was so overgrown and unmaintained that code enforcement had to issue a violation for them to do the cleaning, because in some of the storms that we had last spring and summer, I believe that there was a overflow because the vegetation had choked out all of the discharge pipes. It was apparently in very poor condition, and there was flooding. I don't know what the plan is for replanting at this juncture, but I can find out and report at the next meeting.
If you could, I suspect that it's supposed to look like it does right now and just wasn't maintained to that standard, but if you can confirm or deny that for our next meeting, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much, Mrs. Mahalo. I have one more hand up, I think, Rich.
Yes, we do. And the last one is Mr. or Mrs. DeFrancesco.
Yep.
Hello?
Hello?
Okay.
Go ahead. I think they muted
I'm
themselves.
sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you now, yes.
Great. Sorry about that. Dan DeFrancisco, 26 Jeanette Drive, Newtown Square. Just have a question. The Listener walking path that runs parallel to 252 and then parallel to the EA access road, is that public property or is that township property or is that specific for Listener residents only?
It is intended to be public property. It has not been offered to the township yet for dedication because they haven't finished the actual alignment, if you will, yet. But the intention in the future is that will be for public use of all residents. And in fact, the Toll Brothers has indicated to us that it's okay for residents to be using that now.
Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Seeing no other hands up, we will close the public comment session. And with that, we will adjourn our meeting for this evening. I appreciate everybody taking the time to participate. And thank you all. Stay safe. Please maintain social distancing. And we'll be doing this again at our next meeting in May. Thank you very much and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Mike, just real quick. Well, first of all, that